In this video, there will be two parts. Mostly, I will be talking about how you can control a vertex animation from a blueprint. So, like this example, there are two doors. They are vertex animated, and we control them from a blueprint. But before this, I will just briefly present the new stuff introduced in the new version of the plugin, which is version 102, which you can see here in the plugins window. If you search EVA, just check that you have the updated version. So first of all, let's see what we have in the new version. And for this, I will open a new level. So for presenting this, I will be using this Lego car model I took from mechabricks.com website. I will not add this to the example project for copyright reasons. I don't think we'll allow it. But if you want, actually, I can make a tutorial how to import and animate those. Let me know in comments. So let's see for the new features. So first of all, I will put this car at the origin. You will see why in a second. And then concerning the new features, we have, first of all, when you started, we have now some those messages appearing. So you see what's going on when it opening slowly. This model is kind of, I choose it to show it because it's kind of, imported as is, and it has like ton of materials. It has 14 materials, and which is kind of slow with Unreal to create those temporary materials we use here. So, and you can see in these messages that the most of the time it's spent in creating those. The other new things we have here, so if I choose a part, you can see we have restored this dialog. So we can see where, what are the coordinates of the pivot are. And for example, we can also update the pivot. And it's important to know that's the default dialog from the modeling mode. Which is important here to know is that it's in the world space, unfortunately. So it's, if you want to change the location, you need to put the model at 0. Otherwise, you will have the offset here, the location of the model in the world. I think maybe in the future we will make our own dialog like this, and it will be in local space. And you can, if you don't want it, you can just drag it outside of the window, or you can permanently disable it here in the properties here, transfer panel, disable it. Other feature is also related to the materials. So we, as I said, the materials are kind of slow, so we changed the way preview materials are switched. Now it's much faster. So basically, before it was doing the same job for all the 14 materials, and now it's just doing it once. And the other kind of related thing is that the hide show was also optimized. You can hide show parts by pressing H button. Besides this, we have also fixed some bugs in the materials and added some new parameters that I will show in the next part. Now let's see how to control the vertex animation with the blueprint. And so here we have those two doors. And the idea is that when I enter in the player enters in this collision box, there will be overlap event and the door will open, and when the player exits, the door will close. So the door is just basically a simple mesh made of 4 boxes, and they slide them using the assembly effect. So let's just play from here. You need to play to see it. And then if I approach this door, it opens. If I go, and they look exactly the same. And like if I go out when the door is during the animation, it will switch the direction. See? And there's also some other optimizations, like for example, when the door is fully open, it will just hide the mesh because like it's inside the walls. Here we left a little bit of the mesh just to see that it really disappears. And then we also disable the world position offset evaluation where when the door is not moving, and we'll see now how it works in the blueprint. So this door on the left is controlled by a timeline, which means there a timeline playing, and each frame, each ticks, it updates the position of the door. And this door, it is controlled by what I call here auto, which means it only sends the first event to start the opening or start closing the door, and the rest of the animation will just be playing automatically in the material. So this one is like cheaper. And this one, you need to call the material, update the material every tick. The parameters of those 2 blueprints are controlled here. So you can like start it, open it, close it. There's the time it takes to open, etc. and the out. Now let's check this blueprint. So our blueprint here is composed of the wall mesh, door mesh, and the collision. The collision has the on-overlap event attached. And in the construction script, first thing we do is to set the material, dynamic material instance. And if we have auto animation, we use this material instance, door auto, and otherwise we use timeline material instance. Now let's check those materials and the mesh. Here we have our mesh, and I have here 2 materials, auto and timeline, and I have just a material that just a normal material instance without anything changed that we can edit. Cannot edit this directly because it's like a compound blueprint, it will not work, but we put the door mesh here. You see the animation. We go into eva, we run it, and you can see it very simple. You have 4 of those boxes and the pivots, and the pivots are oriented like this in this direction, and this in opposite direction, and again this direction, opposite direction. We have our favorite assembly effect. So if we open the anim layer, we see that everything is here is normal. We have this new parameter called reverse time, which is disabled. So by default its parameter is enabled because we are kind of assembling the meshes. Material is called assembly. So when we have this house, for example, it first appears in an unassembled position and then descends to assembled position. So the assembled position is actually 0 in the time. And this parameter by default is checked. So it will assemble the house. In the case of the door by default is in closed position with like the position of the mesh with the offset, world position offset is at 0. And when the time is 1, it opens. So time it just goes in the other direction. So that's why we added this checkbox here. And the other checkbox we added the use opacity, because as you've seen with the house, it will just appear from the air. And here we don't want the things disappear, so we will don't use opacity at all. We also unchecked the rotate in this case because nothing rotates, so that spares are some shader instructions. Beside this, we can start to look in those two ways of controlling it. So we have those two variables here, auto time and control time, that controls it. And actually the control time variable is exactly what we use here in the preview. So when I scroll here the timeline, the plugin will set the control time to true, and then will increment or decrement the time value here. And that's exactly what we will be using with the timeline implementation. So let's check this in the blueprint. In the event graph here in the blueprint, we have those two overlap event on begin overlap and on end overlap. And we will check if we use auto, material, or timeline. And we will call open close door auto or open close door timeline with open check it or uncheck it. So check it means close. Let's look at the timeline version first. So what the timeline version does basically is this. It will start playing the timeline, and according to the direction, opening or closing, it will play it or reverse it. So when I'm entering here in the middle of the animation, it will just reverse it in this case, or play it in the forward direction, or reverse in the backward direction. So I don't have to care here about handling the change of direction. And then at each tick of the timeline, which by the way is just a simple things like this, but you can also do something more complex if you want. That's the advantage of this method. And at each tick of the timeline, I will update two variables, two parameters in the material, time and delta time. So time is whatever this thing returns, 0, 1. And delta time is simply the difference between the previous value we passed to the material, the previous tick, which we store here, and the current time. And this we need to avoid the smearing. I already explained that is in previous tutorials. If we look here in the material, so in this material, in this case of the timeline controlled materials, we have this control time static switch parameter to check it to true. So this code will be used for calculating the time. And in this case, it's very simple to see. So we will just take the time directly, the value of the time as the current time, and we will subtract the delta time, give that to previous frame time in previous frame switch. So like I said, I explained that in the first tutorial about how what position offset animation work in Unreal. So that's why we need this delta time. But otherwise, it's just the direct control of the time variable here, which is after that is passed to the rest of the graph. That's the 0, 1 normalized time. And so this our blueprint, it will just play this, giving the time and the delta time as parameter. And to play it slower, we have this open time, which is kind of controls how fast or how slow the door opens, and you can edit it directly here. And to play that animation faster or slower in the init door function, which is called by construction script and begin play, we have here in the end, we set the play rate to open time, to the inverse of the open time, 1 divided by open time. So if the open time it's like 5, for example, it will play during 5 seconds the animation. So the play rate will be 1 divided by 5, 0.2. I think it's important maybe to underline here that we're using the time from the timeline, not the game time. The rest of this graph is basically some optimizations. So for example, when we end playing here on the finish it, we will, if the door is open, we will disable the collision and we will hide it simply because the door is inside the wall in this case. And if the door is closed, so it's in the state where the world position offset is 0 anyways, we will disable the world position offset by setting this variable evaluate world position offset. And that's just all our closed doors will be not evaluating the world position offset. So that's just a performance thing. And then we also will, once the animation is done playing, we will reset the delta time to 0. Otherwise, the delta time will stay at some previous value and the mesh will be just blurry, like motion blur applied to not moving mesh. Inversely, in the beginning, before we start playing the timeline, we will enable the world position offset evaluation because it could be disabled, and we will ensure that the door is visible. And then if we are closing the door, we will put the collision back. And so that's basically how it works. That's pretty simple to implement. But as I said before, the drawback is that this thing is called every frame, every tick. So the blueprint will run every tick and call those methods. And that's maybe if you have like tons of those doors, that will be probably not very performant. So what we will look now is the auto method, which is here, the other event here, open close door auto. And basically it follows the same structure though. First we re-enable the world position offset evaluation and we set it to visible. That doesn't change. And at the end we do also the same thing. We hide it if needed and we disable the world position offset evaluation if needed. And the collision also. So that's the same thing in the both. But now how this thing works is completely different. So let's look in the material first. In the material here we have this auto time switch. By default it false, and when it's true, what it expects is the variable called start time and then the variable called reverse. The start time is like the game time when the animation should start, and the reverse is the direction, so from 0 to 1 or from 1 to 0, closing or opening the door. And then it will like subtract the start time and the current game time, and then also apply some math to play from 0 to 1 or 1 to 0. And here we will use, for the length of the animation, we will use the same variable called time to build, which is called like this because, well, basically this material initially it's for assembling things, so time to assembly. And so that's the length of the animation, those 3 parameters. are coded. This defines our time, normalized time of the animation. What we will do in the blueprint here, when we start opening the door or start closing the door, we will calculate and send to the material those two parameters, the direction, if it's opening or if it's closing. So that's parameter called reverse, and the start time, which is the game time when the effect should start. And to calculate this start time, there is some code here. So when we are not playing the animation currently, the start time is just the get time in seconds, the current time. But if we want to handle this when we enter the collision and then exit, see, it has to play from the middle, but in the other direction. Now this map here is what we use to calculate the start time in the past in the correct place, like if we started in the past from the other directions. And we assume that this code will always, like, if you want, flip the direction of the animation. If it's not flipping, this condition just will skip the execution. So we will execute this if we call it with the opposite direction in the middle of the execution. If we call it 2 times with open or 2 times with close, it will do nothing. There's this XOR here. So that's basically how it's implemented. And after that, we will wait after we started the animation. So after that, we will put a delay of how much time remaining for the animation to play. Again, it's a retriggerable delay, and there's this math just to take into account the fact that we can flip the animation direction in the middle. And once we end it, we will do all this stuff as before, and we will take this opening variable into account, which is simply the copy of this parameter here. As you can see, it's a little bit more complicated to implement, but it's also a more performance, because we just need to call the material, set up the material once, and then the material will play itself one animation of opening or the closing the door. But for this to work, we also need more initialization. So in the init door, we have to set the, well, in both cases, we have to set the time to build, the copy this open time from the parameters, and then we need, for the case where it's auto animated, we need to set the reverse at the beginning and the start time. And for the start time, we take the start time in the past, so current time more open time. Otherwise, in the beginning, we will have one animation play, because if we start exactly at the time and the current time, it will play once. So we like pretend that we started in the past and the door is already closed or opened. And then for the rest, the collision, etc., it's the same. So as you can see, nothing really extremely complicated. And as I said, the result, you can see if you play, so it's like this. When I enter in the collision, I can open the door, can pass through, the door closes behind me, and I cannot enter back because the collision is set back to on. And if I like leave when it's opening or closing, it will just flip the direction. That's it for this tutorial. I will update the example project is this, and you can study this example yourself. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next videos.